silver cylinder at the very top of the building there. Now that is called 311 South Wacker, and that is actually the tallest building in Chicago that has never had a name. The reason I say never had a name instead of doesn't have a name is because the Hancock building technically does not have a name anymore. It's called 875 North Michigan Avenue. But 311 South Wacker has never had a name. Also, another fun fact about this building, the cylinder at the very top, that is the brightest point in Chicago's skyline. I mentioned that earlier with the Matt building. Or actually, no, I didn't. Sometimes I'll mention that. But yes, the Matt building is in between the tallest building in Chicago and the brightest point. Now that cylinder up there, it's the brightest point in Chicago's skyline. It used to have 2,000 fluorescent bulbs in it. There was an issue with that. Birds. They used the moon to navigate. They were mistaking that giant lantern for the moon, and they were flying directly into it. So, to make it more environmentally friendly, they removed 400 bulbs, dimming it slightly, but it is still considered the brightest point in Chicago's skyline. And now, folks, let's talk about the elephant in the room, shall we? This very tall black building with the two wide antennas, and I always like to introduce it like a giant professional wrestler. So if y'all don't mind, standing at 1,456 feet, designed in 1974 by Bruce Graham and Fosler Kahn, 110 stories, 16,100 windows. It's the WILLIS Tower. Say it with me, everyone. The Sears Tower. There it is. Now, I know some of you were picking up what I was putting down there at the end. Now, I just rattled off a whole bunch of info, but don't worry, I'm going to do it again. This building was built in 1974 by Bruce Graham and Fosler Kahn. It is 1,456 feet tall, and until 1996, this was the tallest building in the world. Now, Fosler Kahn, he is considered the Einstein of modern architecture. He developed the way this building was constructed, called a bundled tube construction pattern. Now, the best way I can describe a bundled tube construction is that is not one structure, but 9 75-foot tubes or boxes, all fused together into one. What that does is it makes the building strong enough to sway in the wind. Now, each of those tubes are actually reinforcing themselves against the other, so it's strong enough to sway. Now, that building does sway in the wind 18 inches in either direction on a windy day, a whole foot and a half. Now, I can't prove this to you, but it takes some work. You gotta go to the top floor of the Willis Tower. It is called Willis on a windy day. Go into the bathroom of that top floor and look into all the toilets. What you will find is water sloshing around back and forth as the building gets pushed. Now, at the very top of the building, you're going to see two white radio antennas. I know you can't see it right now. You'll take my word for it. But there are two white radio antennas on top of the Willis Tower. They will come into view as we pass this building. I have a question for you guys about those two white radio antenna. Yes or no, it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong, just yell it out. Do those two white radio antenna contribute to the height of the building? Yes or no? No. But if you say yes, I don't blame you. It's kind of a hard question because it depends on what is on your building. I did give you guys a hint. Those are radio antenna. They serve a specific mechanical function to them. They do something, so they do not count towards the height of your building. But if you have a spire on your building, literally just a decorative stick that doesn't do anything aside from just standing up there, that does count towards the height of your building. A good example of a spire will be on top of the Trump International Hotel and Tower. Now, the two radio antenna on top of Willis, a few years back as a publicity stunt, they actually had those two radio antenna get married. Yes, nice little ceremony for the radio antenna. Now, the wedding for the radio antenna, that was fine, but the reception was incredible. Get it, radio antenna, reception. You know it's a good joke when you feel the need to explain it. Last thing I'll say about Willis. Why is it called that? Well, the easy answer is money. It used to be called Sears. Sears moved out, and the Willis Insurance Company offered $1 billion just for 3 floors of that building and the naming rights. They won the naming rights, that $1 billion bid. It's why we call it the Willis Tower now. Fun fact about the Willis Insurance Company, it is one of the insurance companies that actually brokered the insurance for the Titanic. Yeah, so let that sink in. Another terrible pun, yes. The puns are bad, guys. I feel really bad about saying them, but you know what? My heart will go on. Another terrible pun. Now, next building I'll be talking about is past the bridge on the right-hand side. It's this burgundy-clad building. Now that is the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Center building. Now the original purpose of this building was to trade agricultural futures. Now trading agricultural futures, that is very similar to trading stock, but in mass amounts of agricultural goods. Now the reason I mentioned that, the center of the building, as we pass you'll notice, it is in between these two tall towers. That is because the center of the building, that is the location of the main trade floor. Now the main trade floor, back in the day, whenever you traded, you used hand signals to communicate clear across the other side of the room, so that main trade floor had to be completely open space. So the entire weight of the main center of the building is actually being held up by the two side towers because it couldn't have any load-bearing structures on the inside. Now you'll notice on the two side towers, each corner has these serrated lines. There's more corners than there should be. Now there's a reason for that. It was to create the most amount of corner offices possible for a building. There are 16 corner offices for every floor of that building. If you're wondering to yourself, why do they need 16 corner offices for every floor? I will answer your question with a question. Have you ever met an agricultural futures trader? That is a joke. If you are one of those, it's not about you and I'm sorry. Next building. It's called the Civic Opera Building, right, on the right-hand side, past the bridge. It's an often favorite on the tour. Now, this was designed by Graham Anderson Probst and White in 1929, and it was paid for in 1929 by a millionaire named Samuel Insull. That is why this building will often be called Insull's Throne. Now, you can see why it's called his throne. If you look to the top, it looks like a giant chair with a backrest and two armrests on the sides.
Oh, yeah.
Now the story goes that Samuel Insull paid for this building to get built for his opera singing mistress, who had gone to New York to make it big as an opera singer, and every time this woman would sing for the New York opera houses, they would hear her sing and tell her the same thing, go back to Chicago, we don't want you. So she did, furious, and he built her this massive theater with the back of the theater facing the east, as an insult to New York and to New York theaters. Lesson in karma time though, folks. Don't try to make fun of an entire city with a building. 3 months after that building was built in 1929, the stock market crashed and Samuel Insull lost everything he had. He was later found just a few months later in the Paris subway system with 89 cents in his pocket, no opera singing mistress. Now the building is home to the Lyric Opera and over 3,000-seat theater. Now on the right-hand side, we have the Bank of America building, designed by Getchin Partners this last year. This is actually the newest building completed on the river in Chicago, and it gives me a good time to tell you guys how many tall buildings. Hello! How many tall buildings we have. Now, this is why I don't know every building in the city. This is just how many tall buildings we have. I'm going to tell you guys how many high-rise buildings there are in Chicago. Now, what constitutes a high-rise is 75 occupiable floors. In the 224 square miles of Chicago, there are 1,397 high-rise buildings. Now, coming up from underneath the bridge, we're going to see a very historically significant part of Chicago, ladies and gentlemen. Not Starbucks, that's the first thing we're going to see. Now, we do have an interesting connection with Starbucks. The first Starbucks built outside of Seattle was here, and it was this was not also it, but also the world's first Starbucks is built in Chicago. It's called the Roastery. It's right on the Magnificent Mile, close to where the Windella Boat Dock is, probably about a 10-minute walk from that. I love the Roastery. It's really cool. It's 4 stories tall. It's almost like if a Willy Wonka chocolate factory had a baby with a coffee shop. It's really cool. But I like the Roastery. You can get coffee there that you can't get at any Starbucks in the world. But the actual historically significant place is this red brick building. Now, not the building itself, but the land it sits on. The land this building sits on was once home to the Wigwam. In the 1860s, the Wigwam was a building where the president was actually nominated for the presidency of the United States. He was an Illinois lawyer, 1860 Illinois lawyer, president, you probably know who I'm talking about. Abraham Lincoln was nominated at that building, or at that spot there. Now, I used to ask the audience, 1860 Illinois lawyer, who was it? Then I held out the mic and they would say Lincoln. The reason I stopped is because most of the time I wouldn't say Lincoln. I wouldn't hear Lincoln. I would say 1860. That's a very important year. Illinois lawyer. Who was it? Without fail, every time. What name would I hear? Obama. Every single time. And I always specified 1860. I get it though. He is the president's most closely associated with Chicago. But Obama came here in 1988, not 1860. Now on the right-hand side, you're going to see this curved green glass building here, and that's called 333 West Wacker, designed by Cohn Pedersen and Fox in 1983. This building was designed using a method in architecture called contextualism. Contextualism is in architecture whenever you design a building within the context of the building's surroundings. So what that means, the river is bending right here, so this building is bending with the river. It's contextualized with it. Now another fun fact, has anyone here seen the film Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Anyone? Anyone? Yeah, there's a lot of people. There's a scene in that movie where he is dancing in the parade and his dad looks down from his office. That is his dad's office building. That is where Ferris Bueller's dad works. Now, if you're looking at the street below right now and you're thinking to yourself, Zach, Ferris was not dancing on that street in the film. I've seen it a million times. He was not dancing there. Well, the first thing I'd probably tell you is calm down. Second thing I would say is you're right. He was not dancing on that street in the film. He was dancing about 6 blocks away on Dearborn. It's the power of movie magic and editing. It's a wonderful thing. They just made it look like they were close by. Now, speaking of movie magic, if you're looking on the right-hand side here, you're going to see this large gray box. That is the world's largest projection system, and if it were 9 p.m. right now, I would say look away, because that thing would be turned on, and it would be projecting the world's largest moving art display onto the merchandise mart. Folks, that happens every night, 9 to 10 p.m. Highly recommend checking that out. It's a 20-minute long show. They do it twice. There's a little intermission in between. 9 to 10 p.m. It's called Art on the Mart. Come down here on the Riverwalk, check that out. Now, each section of the Riverwalk has its own theme. The theme to that section right there is fishing. You can fish off of those docks. Now, we do have about 70 different species of fish in the Chicago River. I said that earlier. I want everyone to hear me right now on the boat. If you do decide to fish in the river, I would not eat a single one of those fish. The reason I'm being so intense is because the Chicago River was very, 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 very dirty. Now the Chicago River is very, very dirty. Do not eat the fish. But they do say, thanks to environmental efforts, we should be able to actually swim in the river by the year 2030. Less than 10 years. I'm going to give it a few more decades. Maybe by the 2060s, I'll be ready to dip a toe or something. I don't know. Now, keep it on theme with the river. How deep is it? On average, 22 feet. Also keep it on theme. Let's talk about these things, shall we? These bridges that we keep going underneath. Now, these bridges, they have a special name. They're called Bascule Trunnion Bridges, and they do open up. They open up like this. Hello. They open up every Wednesday and Saturday in the spring and fall to allow boats to come to the lake for the summertime or come into the river docks for the wintertime. Now, I know after I say that, everybody's saying the same thing right now. Zach, that's all well and good, but please, tell us, please, what is the color of the paint that the city of Chicago paints the bridges? Calm down, people, I'll tell you. It's called Bordeaux. I know nobody asked that, but that's my favorite fact to tell on the tour. I don't know why. It's named after the French wine. Now, the next building I'm talking about, past the bridge, on the right-hand side, this white granite-clad building here, that's going to be right next to us as we get out from underneath. That is called 77 West Wacker, designed by Ricardo Bofill in 1992. Postmodernism is the style of architecture. Now, postmodernism is mixing the old with the new. Now, the old in this case, Greek and Roman influences at the bottom here, characterize up steel and glass. That's the modern side, and at the very top of the building. Doesn't just look like the top part of the Parthenon in Greece. That's postmodernism for you. Interesting example of how beautiful a building can be in Chicago. And then right next to it, we've got 55 West Wacker, which is an example of brutalism in Chicago. Now, brutalism, it's a very interesting style, because with that style of architecture, you're not trying to make your building look nice. It is meant to look intimidating and overbearing. Now, this was popularized by Russian government buildings in the 1960s, but the U.S. government used a lot of brutalist style in its buildings as well. A lot of restricted buildings in the U.S. are brutalist, like NASA bases, military bases, and prisons. Now on the right-hand side, you're going to see this darkly clad building with the silver things on every single one of the windows. Now those silver things, they're called mullions. They're meant to reflect sunlight into the building. Now that building is called the Leo Burnett Building. It's home to the Leo Burnett Advertising Agency. Now you may be unfamiliar with that name, but I know you're familiar with at least a few of the characters that Leo Burnett has brought to the world. Leo Burnett has brought us such characters as Snap, Crackle, and Pop, Tony the Tiger, Charlie the Starkist Tuna, the Pillsbury Doughboy, the Marlboro Man, the Jolly Green Giant, Ronald McDonald, just to name a few. They even wrote the Meow Mix theme song. You know the one. Meow, 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 meow. I won't do the whole thing, don't worry. But yes, we do it in the blade for that, the overnight advertising. Now on the right-hand side, you're going to see a red brick building, and lit up on the corner in giant white letters, it says Morton's the Steakhouse going down the side. Y'all see that? Look past that building. You're going to see a green terracotta-clad tower, and more prominently, you'll probably notice, clad in real 24-karat gold leaf, is the clock tower of the Carbide and Carbon building with the gold and green up there. Now, the Carbide and Carbon building is a hotel designed by the Burnham Brothers in 1929. Now, 1929, America was in the middle of something called the Prohibition. Funny enough, the Burnham Brothers designed that building to look like a giant bottle of champagne. They designed a giant bottle of alcohol as a building as a protest against the outlawing of alcohol in the United States. You'll never guess where the Burnham Brothers got that idea. Sharing an illegal bottle of champagne. They were splitting a New Year's party. If that name sounds familiar, the Burnham Brothers were sons of Daniel Burnham, the guy that designed the White City. Now on the right-hand side, you're going to see a very tall, skinny white tower there. Now that white tower is called the Mather Tower. It was built in 1928. Whenever it was first built, it was the tallest building in the world. For 2 weeks, and they got usurped. Also, the top 3 floors of the Mather Tower a few years back began to crack into grade. Instead of fixing them on site, though, they detached them, flew them to a new location, fixed them there, then flew them back in using a helicopter, attached them to the very top of the building. Now, right next to us here, we have another older-looking limestone-clad building called the London Guarantee and Accident Building, designed by Alfred Alschuler in 1924. Once again, this is French Beaux-Arts style. It's an ornate bottom, stack of plain floors, ornate top. Now, talking about the ornate top up there, do you guys see those columns? They're called Corinthian columns, and at the very top, you're going to see a little structure, kind of looks like a little temple. Well, that's exactly what that word means in Italian. It's called a tempietto. And if you have a sweetheart you want to get engaged to, you can go up there. for $2,500. That's how much it costs, but hey, they give you a lot for that. They give you a nice little kneeling place, they pop a fancy bottle of champagne, and that's it. That's all they do. Main word of advice, when you decide to go up there to propose, basically the person you're asking is gonna say yes. Maybe swing it by first in the elevator. Now, moving over to the left-hand side here, see what I'm doing? I'm pointing. You're gonna see a beautiful limestone-clad building with this church-like ornamentation at the top. That is the Tribune Tower, designed by Howells and Hood in 1922 for a contest to design the world's most beautiful office building. They won that contest with their neo-Gothic design. Now, neo-Gothic, that's the modern architecture of that day and age, the 1920s, mixing with Gothic architecture at the very top, with those flying buttresses and cathedral-like ornamentation at the top and on the bottom, meant to be mirroring the European Gothic cathedrals such as Notre Dame in Paris. Now, swinging back over to the right-hand side, I'm going to see these two brown brick buildings. Those make up the largest hotel in Chicago, called the Hyatt Regency. But as we pass, I want you guys to focus on the shorter of the two buildings. The one's a little bit further away, and look behind it. Towering behind the shorter brown brick building is a very tall white building with the black lines going up. Y'all see that? That building is called the Aon Center, but it's gone by a few other names. The Standard Oil Building, Big Stan is one of my favorites, but also the $80 million mistake. The reason it's called that, Edward Durell Stone, the architect that designed that building, originally clad the building in fine white Italian Carrara marble. That's the finest marble you can get your hands on, same marble used to sculpt Michelangelo's David. Now, I know I made a joke earlier, but raise a hand. Anybody here been to Chicago in the wintertime? January, February, Chicago winter? If you have, you know it gets rough. How rough it can really be. February of 2019, there were several days that month we had negative 60 wind chill, colder than the surface of Mars. That tile could not take that harsh weather. It began to crack. They did not want it to fall, so they had to reclad that building completely in North Carolina granite. It cost $80 million to reclad that building, about half as much as it cost to build the building in the first place. It just goes to show you folks, you can't take marble for granite. Another terrible pun. Now, not a lot of tour guides are brave enough to make a joke about rocks like that, but I am a little bolder. Another one, get it? Boulder, rocks. On the right, you're going to see a darkly rectangular-shaped building and a triangular-shaped building. As we pass, look in between them. Right next to us, you're going to see the white undulating balconies going up Aqua by Jeannie Gang. Now, that one was built in 2009 by the Chicago local architect Jeannie Gang. Whenever it was first built, it was considered the most beautiful residential tower in the world. Also, if anybody here has seen the first episode of the Netflix series Ozark, you'll probably remember a moment where something very unfortunate happens to a man on a balcony. Shouldn't say on, I should say off. That's one of those balconies. Fun fact. Also, whenever that building was first built, it was the tallest building in the world, designed by a lead female architect. No longer the tallest building in the world, designed by a lead female architect. I know, bummer. Just kidding, folks, it's not a bummer, because Jeannie Gang went wild this past year and broke her own record with this wavy blue building on the right. Yes, folks, this is also by Jeannie Gang. It's called the St. Regis. It is 1,198 feet tall. It's the third tallest building in Chicago now, and now it's the tallest building in the world, designed by a lead female architect. It is a luxury apartment and hotel, so folks, get excited if you're looking for some Chicago real estate. The penthouse is still available for $24 million, and that is for something called raw space as well. If you're unfamiliar with that term, that means concrete walls, concrete floor, concrete ceilings. So you're going to have to spend another few million just putting walls in. And now, folks, I'm going to sit down. That is because I am not going to talk about what's around us. I would love to talk about what's underneath us, the Chicago River. Now, I have a question for you guys, and to answer this question, all you have to do is point. What direction does the river flow? Does it flow from the river into the lake, point that way, or does it flow from the lake into the river, point this way? River to lake, lake to river, where did you point? Now, if you're pointing from the river into the lake, I am so sorry you are incorrect, but I'm going to give you another chance to get the question right. It flows from the lake into the river, but was that always the case? Yes or no? No, we reversed the flow of the Chicago River in the year 1900. I don't know why I said we. I was not part of the project, but here's how and why we did that. Back in the mid-1800s, the Chicago River, to put it lightly, was super gross. We were dumping a lot of stuff into it. Human waste and garbage, massive amounts of animal waste, animal carcasses from the stockyards, and industrial waste from the factories. Chemicals were getting dumped into the river. The river was so filthy, it self-ignited twice. That means it set itself on fire 2 times. Also, there are first-hand accounts of people witnessing chickens able to walk across the river over the crusted-over grime during the summertime. That's gross, but it gets grosser because all that stuff was flowing down into Lake Michigan, and you will never guess where we got and still do get our drinking water. Yum, 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 Lake Michigan. And we were drinking all of that nasty stuff, and people started to get sick. Cholera started to pop up around the water supply, very serious issue of waterborne illness. So they developed a group called the Illinois Water Reclamation District to solve this problem. I'm sure at the very first meeting, this group of people, the really quiet guy said something along the lines of, "Hey guys, we can just stop throwing stuff in the river." Then the really loud guy piped up with, "Let's reverse the flow," and they went with his idea. It sounded cooler. Now this is the way they did it. They dug a 26-mile-long canal that connected the Chicago River with the Des Plaines River. The reason they did that is because the Des Plaines River was 5 feet lower than Chicago's river, and water is always going to go where gravity takes it. So since that river was lower than ours, if we connected the two, our water would fall into the Des Plaines, reversing the flow. Now that canal project was huge. More dirt was moved to that canal than the Panama Canal, but they finally finished it on January 2nd of 1900, when they blew the final dam up at 3 a.m., and like magic, the river began to flow from the lake into the river, down that canal, which they called the Sanitary and Ship, with a P, canal, into the Des Plaines, out to the Illinois, out to the Mississippi, out to the Gulf of Mexico. Yay, clean water. Here's the issue. Everyone hated us for doing this. Indiana sued us, Wisconsin sued us, Michigan sued us, and St. Louis sued us. St. Louis sued us because they woke up the next morning and what did they find in their water supply? The Mississippi River. Chicago, so they're pretty upset about that. They sued us. All those court cases were thrown out. It is important to note, though, that all those court cases were also held in Chicago. Now, St. Louis, they did get back at us. They bottled up all that dirty water we sent their way, sold it back to us. We still drink it to this day, though. We call it Budweiser. Take that, $1 million beer corporation. Zach's coming after you, especially with that crack about Pabst earlier. But the actual way, I want to wrap this up, there have been 2 rivers permanently reversed in the entire history of the world. The first one was the Amazon River, happened millions of years ago naturally. The second one was the Chicago River, happened in the year 1900 manually, considered one of the greatest engineering feats of all time, and a lot of people were mad about it. Rivers do get temporarily reversed in the world, and that's because dams are opening up usually inside of them. And now, folks, as we're turning here, I'm going to stop talking this time a lot quicker than my last break, probably about 3 minutes long as we're turning here. I'll get back on the mic as we're fully turned around, start talking about Navy Pier. Now, folks, our Captain Ben already told you guys this, so make sure, I want to let y'all know this is to be an issue in this area. If you are taking photos, you can stand on the boat, just please do not stand on top of any of the seating, the white chairs, the wooden benches. That's just a quick safety precaution. Again, you can't stand on the boat, just don't stand on top of those seats. That counts for kids as well. Thank you. I'll get back on the mic as we're fully turned around.